This is an interview of Moretha Johnson on June 12, 2021, via video conference from her home in Washington, DC. Moretha Johnson will be describing her life story, including experiences at Asbury United Methodist Church, senses of how Asbury has fit into Washington, DC history, and connections with Washington, including work at Medstar Information Services in DC and with the DC and National PTA. My name is Adelle Banks, and I am honored to have the opportunity to interview you today. Thank you for taking the time to do this interview and your willingness to do this. It is sure to enhance the archives of Asbury, as well as the archives of the DC Oral History Collaborative. You will be able to review this recording in the future, and you have the right to refuse to answer any question asked today. Have fun with your memories. I look forward to hearing some of them. Tell me about where you were born and your earliest years.
I am a native Washingtonian. I was born here in 1943. And I am a third generation member of Asbury United Methodist Church.
Can you tell me a little bit about your parents, please?
Well, basically, I can tell you about my mother. Her name was Elsie. She loved to sing. She loved to sew, and she made our clothes. And I am one of 3 children of hers, myself, Tawana, and Maurice.
Tawana's last name is Tawana Jackson?
Jackson,
And the other person's full name?
Last name is Ross, R-O-S-S.
Maurice Ross. And tell me about your early family life, as far as all of you being together. What do you recall?
Well, I would say that we have been in and out with each other, depending. I'd stay with my mother for some time. Sometime it would be most of the time with my grandmother, who was a member of Asbury. Her husband was a member of Asbury. And so, and then the house always had some relative in there, like an aunt, uncle, a cousin. I guess it comes from the fact that when they were in Maryland, everyone seemed to be close together. So if someone needed to go somewhere to live, well, my grandparents' house were always open. And so that's where I stayed with my grandmother, my aunt, my mother, my uncle, my cousin. Oh, who else? I can't remember. But anyhow, it was always someone there.
And I understand that music was a part of your life as you grew up.
Yes, my grandparents, Robert Boston and Blanche Boston, sang in the choir in Maryland. She was a soprano, and I believe he was a tenor. And of course, all of her sisters and all of his brothers and sisters sang. My grandmother was one of 10 children. My grandfather was one of 8, 7 brothers and 1 sister. And it just seems as if everyone in the family sang. Might not have sung in a choir, but sang around the house or wherever.
And as you grew up in DC, what were your first impressions of DC at that time, of your neighborhood? Like, what neighborhood did you live in? What do you remember about that?
That's a good question. I know we lived on 5th Street Northwest, not too far from Asbury. And that was the place where they left from their house and walked to Asbury every Sunday. Then we moved to the 600 block of Princeton Place Northwest. I don't know, I didn't pay too much attention to the street as such. I know there were people who lived on both sides of us and the people across the street. As time progressed on, I attended the school there, not too far from us. Before integration came, I attended a school down near Howard University. And once all of the things that we could not do as far as going to school, I ended up at Parkview Elementary School from the 1st grade to the 6th grade.
All right. Can you tell me a little bit more about your memories of segregation, since you've mentioned that? What do you recall of it? Was it something that stood out for you?
I think I was a little too young. When I went to the first school, I did not like it, so I cried the whole time. The teacher set me on 2 chairs and covered myself with, I guess it was I'm not too sure it was a coat. And then my mother would come and get me, and then I'd be happy. And of course, the next day having to go back to school to months, I didn't like it. So therefore I ended up on the chair again. In kindergarten, I learned nothing. Once the integration came into effect, I went to Parkview. I did a little better. My mother went to work, and then an aunt who lived with us, and she walked with me to Parkview Elementary School. And one of the things I remember, she says, now you're going in this door, and this is the door that you're going to be coming out of. But she didn't realize that my room was on the opposite side of the school. So I had to come out of that strange door and stand there and cry until she found me and walked me home. I was that kind of child, what can I say? But eventually I got accustomed to being in school and where to go and where not to go.
So that was more the elementary level that you're speaking of, where you're,
Yes, the elementary level, poor me.
All right. And as we talk, I want you to look more up at me a little bit more. Yeah,
Okay.
so I can see your eyes more, because I'd like
Okay.
to see your eyes. That's good. Thank you. And it just seems like you're looking down a little bit. So if you could just look up a little bit.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. So when was it that you shifted to an integrated school? What level of schooling was that? Do you remember it being a dramatic change?
I believe at that particular time, we went to, well, stated, of course, let me get this straight. Out of elementary, we went to McFarland Junior High School the first year. Then we found out that the area had been changed and I had to go down to Banneker. And that's where I graduated from.
And so when was it that you shifted? Which school was it where you shifted from being in a segregated circumstance to an integrated one?
Well, we left Parkview, and then we went up to McFarland Junior High School. And then when things changed, it came back down and we graduated from Cardozo. I don't know how I could forget that. And that's how it changed up. I only went 1 year to McFarland. And then the following year, we went to Banneker and then to senior high school. And so those things took place, but I don't think it affected me in a way that I was saying, oh, I can't do this, or I can't do that. I seem to have lived in an area where things seemed to be peaceful. There were no problems with neighbors. There might have been 1 or 2 families that might have been white, but they moved out. The rest of the people in the 600 block of Princeton Place were all Black.
I see. Okay, thank you. So did you continue your education after high school, or was high school it for your education?
That was the end of that. I looked for a job, and it took a little while. I didn't start work until I was in my 20s, but I did have the opportunity to babysit for Gene Lofton, who at that time was the director of the music at Asbury. And after that, my grandmother became ill, so I helped to take care of her.
So tell me a bit about the story of how you came to become connected with Asbury United Methodist Church in Washington, DC.
I was told at the age of 3, that was my first meeting with Asbury. My Aunt Ethel took me there every Sunday. I think I cried too, but not as much. And my mother seemed to have told me, now remember I'm over 30 now, But I think she said that at the age of 3, I said the Lord's Prayer for whatever program that was taking place. And from the time of age 3 up until now, which I am 77, thank God for that, I have been involved in Asbury.
All right. And what were some of your early memories beyond that? For instance, Sunday school or worship or youth choir, were you involved in anything of that sort?
Okay. Yes, Sunday school, because that's where my aunt went to her class and I was in a Sunday school. MYF, Methodist Youth Fellowship, I was involved in that. And then, of course, one time, Mark Fax had the youth choir, and Mark Fax was the director of music at Asbury. And then Gene Lofton came along, and we sang in that choir. Now, one of the things at that particular time, the Wesleyan Choir had the choir loft on the first floor, and the other choir sang in the balcony, and we sang maybe once a month or something of that nature. There were many things that we had done. We'd go other places to sing. And NYF, of course, kept us going to churches and having meetings at Asbury.
So when you said other choir, were you at that point in that other choir?
The other choirs, meaning that besides the ones I just mentioned, were the ones on outside of Asbury. And I don't remember their names as such.
But at that point, you were in a youth choir?
Yes, it's sort of a youth choir. Mr. Fax was the first one. We would meet on Saturdays and have rehearsal. We didn't sing for services as such, but we did have rehearsals. And then after him came Gene Lofton, and we did sing. I'm not too sure if it was the first Sunday or the second Sunday of each month. And we sang in the balcony, and we did very well.
And so you mentioned Methodist Youth Fellowship. Is that something that took you out of the city, or was it all within Asbury or within Washington?
We went to other churches and fellowship with their membership, NYF as they call it at the time. And we did go on little trips to various places. And Fred Booker at that time was associate minister. And so he would get us together and we would sing various places and enjoyed it.
And I believe that some Asburyans, as part of Methodist Youth Fellowship, went to Morgan College. I think it would have been called Morgan State College at that point. Did you ever do that?
We went there for the gathering of other NYFers. It wasn't because we become starting to go classes there, but every year we would go and meet people from Maryland and Virginia and have different places to go and talk about God's God and whatever else they have on their program.
And do you have any recollections of either long-term friendships or whether this was an activity that was involving people of different racial and ethnic groups?
Well, that's a good question. I guess I never looked as far as color was concerned. I know that as far as family members, I have cousins who were part of NYF also, who I would see there. I don't remember. The only thing that I seem to remember is that when we stayed over, I had a roommate who was white for one day. And then the next day I had another roommate who apparently I would see her every day. I'm not too sure the reason why the first one left, being in the same room with me or not, and I never asked.
Was the second roommate African-American?
No, she was white.
So you had white roommates both times when you were both,
Yeah.
or on each day of the times that you were there.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And so you mentioned something about how your family got to Asbury, but what do you remember about, like, what mode of transportation? How did you get there?
We walked from where we lived on 5th Street Northwest to 11th and K Street Northwest. And then as time progressed on and we moved from there, we were in a car, and my Aunt Ethel and her husband would drive the car to Asbury, and he belonged to Mount Carmel Baptist Church. So he would put us out at Asbury, and then he would go to his church, and then after service, he'd come back and get us.
And so were you, which ward were you in? Have you lived in different wards? Like at that point, when your young life in Asbury, were you living in one particular ward, one particular neighborhood, and then moved to another?
That's a good question. I have no clue what the living on Princeton Place. I don't know what the ward number was. I know that I'm in Ward 5 now. But before that, that was not, I guess, something of great importance. Living on the street was okay. The neighbors were okay. Getting on the bus to come down to church if we had to, when we lived on Princeton Place, we did that.
So sometimes you walked, sometimes you took the bus.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So what about some of your key areas of involvement at Asbury as an adult? What would you say comes to mind most as far as some of the things you have been involved in?
The Wesleyan Choir, higher grades, the NYF, of course, for a while, the United Methodist Women, and let's see what else. Of course, Brighter Day Crocheting for Christ, which have been involved in more in years than the other things. And I think that's all I can think of right now.
Okay, so I'd like to ask you a bit about most of those. So the Wesleyan Choir, you are a soprano, is that right?
Yes, that's what they tell me, yes.
And you are sometimes a soloist. I'm wondering what songs you are known for and what your favorite songs are.
Oh, I don't have any favorite songs. Music is something that no matter what it may be, I enjoy. And yes, I've done some solos, and I don't have any particular song that I can think of as one that I like better than the other. I enjoy music altogether.
And you've had a number of roles in the Wesleyan Choir. Can you talk a little bit about what some of those have been, different offices?
Yes, I was president. I am still secretary. I think those are the only two. No, the other one was the, which I can't think of now. Bylaws.
Is that the parliamentarian role?
Yeah. That's
what does a parliamentarian for a choir do?
Well, you basically have to put all the things which are to be done by the choir. For instance, if there's a funeral, what you will be expected to do, what to wear. If you had to go to another, that would be in the bylaws. Let's say for the president, vice president, whatever office you might have there, what would their responsibilities be? So that's sort of kind of like.
So it's codified, it's written down what you should be doing and what you should be wearing, like at a funeral or other occasions.
Yes, that's correct.
And as a parliamentarian, were you one to remind, okay, this is what we're supposed to do under this circumstance?
I don't think I had to do that. I think the president would say, like if the funeral's coming up, what we would be wearing, and what we would do after the service, etc.
And I think another role you may have had is chaplain of the Wesleyan Choir.
Oh yes, I have been.
And what does that entail?
That's before the rehearsal started. There would be prayer. Sometimes it'd be read from the Bible, sometimes it'd be read from other things that I felt was something that would be good to the heart and to the soul.
And you are also a member of Higher Praise Gospel Chorale.
Yes.
Could you describe the difference between it and Wesleyan Choir?
Well, the difference is, I don't know, the difference is the Wesleyan Choir sings all kinds of music as such. The Higher Praise, yes, sings songs good for the heart and the soul, and people enjoy that as if it's talking to them. And there are times when we all sing the same thing, the Hallelujah chorus perhaps, or something that might have been written by a composer that we are familiar with. Both choirs might sing that.
I believe it is unusual to be a member of both. I don't think there are many people at Asbury that are both a member of the Wesleyan Choir and the member of Higher Praise Gospel Chorale. So can you talk about why you are?
Well, I like to sing, and no matter what the music is, I don't think I had any reason for. I like the Wesleyan Choir. I like what Higher Praise was doing. And since they were both on Saturdays and at different times, then that was fine with me. But I enjoyed being with them, their company, the various things that they've done, and singing is good for the soul.
So you must have been at Asbury for quite a bit of time on Saturday mornings, because were the rehearsals back to back?
Almost back to back. Maybe 2 hours apart or something, it depends.
And you just kind of hang out there for in between?
Well, yeah, hang out, we'd go across to the store and eat, and then come on back and prepare for the second rehearsal.
Another thing that you did for Asbury is that you spearheaded the Sunday school reunion.
Yes, at one time, right.
How did that come about, and what was the goal of it?
Well, actually, Evelyn Thomas Gray and several other members started this. And every year they would get together and various activities would take place. And as time progressed on, Evelyn and the other ladies became a little older, then of course, other younger people would step in and do basically the same thing. They would send out notices to people to let them know that it would take place and at what time. And there would be wonderful food to eat and various other activities that would take place.
And what was the point of it? What was the aim?
It would have, I guess you said, what is the theme?
The aim of it. Why you didn't have to do this? Why did you want to do this?
It started, I think, as Evelyn and a few other people just needed to get together and to show members of Asbury that there are things that are taking place in that, and there are other things that they can do as far as being a member of Asbury. And I'm just saying that because I know that there's something written that tells the reason why it took place. It was a small group at first, but then as time progressed on, more people were involved in it.
And about how many people would go to this, and how often has it happened?
Well, in previous years, it would be every year. And I would say that we would have 50 or more people to attend.
And I know that one that happened technically more recently, I believe it was 2011, you wrote a reunion song, composed the song.
Well, I seem to, but I don't remember what it sounds like.
Have you composed other music?
Yes, I think I have. I've never thought of myself as a composer, but every now and then something might pop up and I might want to share it.
And I believe one more thing about the reunion is that some people who came for that one-time event in a particular year then maybe started coming back to Sunday school.
That's a possibility. I have never thought of it that way. But there are, most of the people who did attend church school and were involved in other activities within the church.
But everyone who came to the reunion was not necessarily a regular active member of Asbury. It was part of the point to bring people back who maybe had been part of Sunday school, but just hadn't been part of the church for a while.
There's a possibility. They might bring friends to come and to partake in whatever we were doing.
Okay. So I'm wondering about a little bit more about Crocheting for Christ and Brighter Day. And I'm wondering first if you can explain how those two are connected, or if they're one and the same.
When my husband died, I sort of noticed, it's sort of hard to explain. I went to a meeting where it talked about death, and some things sort of came into my mind that Asbury did not have that. They had people to visit, but I thought that maybe it needed to be a little something more. And so when I thought about it, we had a meeting, several of us, and we named it Brighter Day. And from that time on, we were able to do various things for people, send them cards, give them various things to uplift them during their time of bereavement. Crocheting for Christ came in a little later with Jackie Holmes, and that's where the various crocheting things took place. And we would give what we have now, what I call yellow comfort bags. And sometimes there would be soap in it, sometimes it would be the things that they have crocheted, sometimes it would be hot soup, or whatever we thought that would be comforting to them.
Why yellow? Why did you choose to have yellow bags with these items to help people?
That's a good question. I don't know, it just seemed to be brighter, and it catches the eye more so if it had been a darker color. And
was there a reason you decided to call it Brighter Day?
When we had a meeting, I think I said to someone, or those who were there, what do we need to name it? And someone came up with Brighter Day. That was Mary, can't think of her name, she has since died, came up with that, and we've kept it.
And so tell me a little bit more about what you make. You mentioned when it comes to the crocheting, what do you make and who benefits from it?
The crocheting is done by ladies who love to crochet. And they do the, what we call well, it's not really a full thing where you have to put it all the way up, but it goes to your, across your nap and down, and that is your comfort bag. Well, at least that's a comfort. And then inside of that, whatever was crocheted was placed in the bag. I normally will take those things that have been crocheted and bring it home. So whenever there's a death, I have the yellow comfort bags, and I will just fill it with all the things that have been crocheted, or I have in the house to put in the bags.
And do you deliver the bags to the bereaved families, or do they get them some other way?
Before all of the things have been taken hold of us for the past year, before that, we would come to Asbury with the yellow comfort bags, and we would give it to either the husband or the wife or a child of the deceased person. One year, I think we did 10 bags for a family that had more than 4 or 5 people in it. Since that time, we are still crocheting, some of us, and they're not coming to Asbury, they're going to a funeral home in Maryland. Jackie Holmes' son is the one who comes to my house and picks them up and takes it to where he's going to be working.
So you mean because of the COVID-19 pandemic, instead of not doing anything, you still had some crocheting left over and someone was able to bring those to the funeral home? Or were people still, have people in the past year and 3 months or so still been crocheting to help people?
Yes, there's some people who are still crocheting, and I get them. I'm doing crocheting myself. And when Jackie's son comes to my house, sometimes he has 5 bags, maybe more. We have a lady who's not a member of Asbury who does hats and scarves, and she takes that to Jackie's house, and he takes those things up to the funeral home also.
And you mentioned somebody who wasn't a member of Asbury, and I did speak with somebody who talked about how she wasn't a member of Asbury, but she came to Crocheting for Christ, and how you were so helpful, even with like particular kinds of stitches. Do you recall doing that kind of thing? And why is it important that this ministry isn't just for people who happen to attend Asbury United Methodist Church?
Well, the ladies who crochet seem to love what they do. We have several people who are not members of Asbury, who are also part of other crocheting people with other crocheting people. But they come to Asbury. I guess maybe one of the things is that we serve good food, and but the camaraderie is wonderful. They all sit down and they talk, and they show each other new stitches that they can put to wherever they're working on, and they get along extremely well. For people who are not members of Asbury, they come together and they enjoy each other's company. One of the ladies recently had death in the family, and we made sure that some type of acknowledgement went to her. And so it's just something that on a Saturday that you don't have anything to do, but you'd like to be in the company of others who not only tell jokes, but they show you new things to do. And that's on the crocheting part. On the Brighter Day part, we've had seminars on death and other things. One of the things that my sister-in-law, Karen Ross, and I did, we put together a book on what to do when the death comes and where to go, et cetera, et cetera. And we had a meeting on that, and several people who were there decided that they would go ahead and get their whatever they needed to do when they die in place, so that they would not have to be dealing with that later.
Things like wills, for instance?
Well, wills was part of the book that we did. And anything that you would probably think of asking, I believe we had it in the book.
And I guess I just wanted to sum up a little bit about why this is so important to you, and also how much prayer fits into this. I understand that there's prayer involved with the crocheting, is that right?
We have prayer before we do anything. We get in a circle. Of course, you know Richard, he is the only man who is part of the Brighter Day Crocheting for Christ. But we get in a circle, we greet each other. For those who might not be there, we pray for them, we pray for us, and also, and then after that we go, excuse me, and then we go and we sit down and eat. But still there's that camaraderie of talking about things about crocheting and setting up programs. We've had, in former years, we did something for the men, brought them together about death. And we've had other people from funeral homes to come and talk to us about what to expect, what to do, what to look for, etc.
And Richard is Richard Corbett?
Yes, Richard Corbett, yes.
And you talked about the benefits for families that are bereaved and for funeral homes, but I believe that some of the crocheting has helped other populations. Are there other groups or people that you have crocheted for?
Yes, we've been asked. Some people have had co-workers to die, or family members of a co-worker, and they're asked if they could have a yellow comfort bag, and we've given that to them. Yes.
And also maybe beanies for newborn babies at a hospital, or?
Yes, Howard University had a program, and Jackie and I and a few other people from Asbury went there, and we received, I'm not too sure exactly what it is, but a recognition that we had been involved in that.
And then, I'm sorry, go ahead.
It's been a couple of years ago since that took place.
And so some people in Crocheting for Christ made beanies for the newborns at Howard Hospital.
Yeah.
And then the other group was the neighbor to neighbor outreach at Asbury. Was there something involved with that for the Crocheting for Christ ministry?
I think we did basically the same thing. If they were in need of crocheting of any kind, then we would try to give it to them.
So some of the hats and gloves, I think I recall seeing piled up on tables, those were made for people who maybe were homeless or hungry or had some challenges in DC.
That's correct. And normally we've had 100 plus hats and scarves done over several years.
Wow, that's a lot. All right, and so other contributions that you've made at Asbury, I think include, you mentioned United Methodist Women. Don't know how much more you'd like to say about that, or other things you've done related to maybe emailing members of Asbury to make sure they knew about things. Are those a couple of other things that you've done?
If I did, it was just maybe one time for sending out envelopes and things like that. But as far as other things, we've done the best that we can when we find things that have happened. I may not remember all of the things that have taken place. I have found myself to be this type of person. I do something, and then I go on to something else, and I remember nothing. And that is the truth. Someone will say to me, Moretha, you know, you did this. And I said, I did. And I said, when was that? And I'm the type of person who's like, I don't hold on to what I've done. I continue on to something else and try to do better. And so it might sound a little strange, but that's the way I am.
That sounds like a wonderful sentiment to me. But I will remember something that you like to make soup, I believe, and even a soup that has corn cobs in it. Can you explain that? Why is it that you do that? What does it mean to you?
I really don't have a reason for it. It's just I like to eat. But also when Brighter Day Crocheting for Christ has a meeting, especially during the winter time, yes, I make a soup and I put everything that I can possibly put into it. And I don't put salt because I don't put salt in my food. So anyone who wants to do that, they may. Sometimes it's different taste or whatever. And I say to people, you know, okay, fine, enjoy. I have no clue what I put into it. I just cook it.
And are there any events at Asbury that have had a special meaning for you?
Well, I don't know. I've never thought of it in that particular view. I just go there because that's what I like to do. I like the people who are there. No matter who they may be, if they are half drunk or they're just there to be there, or they've been members of Asbury for a long time, and that's fine with me. I try to see people as they are and not pretend that I'm better than anybody else.
And are there any particular pastors that you remember most? And if so, why?
Well, I guess I should remember the pastor who married me. And my husband, 15 years ago, I remember, I see faces, but I don't remember names. And that's because I'm over 30. But Reverend Williams, who was the pastor there for 25 years, I do remember him. And many other pastors also, whose names I can't remember right off the top of my head.
Anything about Reverend Frank Williams that you remember in particular?
No, that he was just a A-OK person. And that he seemed to be okay with me. So that, and his preaching was very good as far as I'm concerned.
All right. And were there any times that the Asbury community was really there for you in a meaningful way?
Well, yes, in the death of my husband, the death of my mother, my aunts, yes. And even at this particular time when my oldest son has been very ill, I've been so very supportive.
So since we're talking about family members, would you please tell me just a little bit more about your husband, what his name was, when you married?
His name is Howard Johnson, a very famous man. He had been married before his first wife died. He had 3 children. So I became a stepmother from that particular from that marriage. Eric and Philip appeared. He worked at the same organization that I had worked at downtown. Well, I can't even think of the name of the company, but anyhow, he and I worked.
Was it Medstar or something else?
That was before that time, before Medstar. But that was 20 years of marriage with him. And I've had 4 grandchildren, and of course, Eric and Philip, of course, my 2 sons, and 4 grandchildren. And I guess that's basically it, other than just taking life day by day, whether they're with them or without them.
And when did your husband pass away?
It's been almost 25 years.
But you still remember Asbury being particularly good at that difficult time.
Sure, very much so.
What do you recall about Asbury as far as it responding to important events over the decades, such as the Civil Rights Movement and the March on Washington in 1963?
One of the things I remember, some of us saying, we're not going to go down there and all that crowd. We're not going at all. We ended up going down there. My Aunt Ethel was in the kitchen cooking whatever they were cooking so that those people who were part of the event came and ate. And we heard the speeches, very hot day, but we seemed to have mingled with many people of all colors. And to say that we weren't going to go, I think it might have surprised us that we did.
So who was we? Did you go with other Asburyans? Did you go with your family? Did you go with friends? Do you remember anything more about that?
The people, some who were with MYF, Fred Booker at the time was the associate minister, I think, and we went down with him, and that was it. I guess, and I might be saying this, and some people will say pitiful, but I did not feel the same thing that those who were involved in the South. I think maybe I was sheltered. I did not, on Princeton Place, feel as if I didn't belong. My grandmother, on the other hand, was from Maryland, and there are things in her life that she did not talk about. The only thing she said about her mother and father is that they were wonderful parents. I tried to find out other information about things that happened in Maryland, and she wouldn't tell me. So I'm thinking that it wasn't the best time. And when she came to Washington, she got a job My grandfather got a job at the Capitol, and they raised all their 8 children. But sometime or another, I did not feel as if I was being mistreated, because that's not the lifestyle that I came up in.
I see. And so did you recall other events like the riots that occurred in DC after the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr.? Is that something you recall?
I was working at the time, and I do remember that I got a ride with one of our co-workers. He was white, and he took me up to a certain spot in Northwest DC, and the rest of it, I walked home. And that's about, what I can remember about that. There was a whole lot of action going on, people breaking this and tearing up this and all of that, but I was not in the midst of it. I felt no harm, even when things were going on as they were.
But you had a white coworker who helped you get home in the midst of that, so was really helping your safety.
Yes. And also a couple of other co-workers too, who were in his car, that he let them out at a certain place. Yeah.
And do you have anything else to add about Asbury and history? Like, for instance, I'm wondering how you respond to recent history where Asbury's Black Lives Matter sign was torn down and burned in December of 2020.
I thought that was out of ignorance. And I understand that one of the men who was involved in that didn't realize that Asbury was a Black church. Due to ignorance, people do stupid things. And if they're not familiar with you personally, they don't think of you as being anything. And not being raised is my own personal opinion. But those who did that, they have no concept as to who they really are and from where they really have come from. And once they find out who they are, I think they will have a different outlook on being mean and evil.
Thank you. Are there other important events related to Asbury or DC history that have special meaning for you?
Not that I can think of right away. As I said before, I do things and go on to something else. And other people remind me of certain things. And I say, oh, really? Okay, that's fine.
All right. So returning to aspects of your life that perhaps are unrelated to Asbury, I'd like to ask you some other things. You talked about the neighborhood that you were in when you grew up. What about the neighborhood in which you live now?
Okay, I'm living on a very nice neighborhood in Northeast DC. Neighbors are very kind and friendly. As a matter of fact, since Eric has been sick, neighbor has been cutting the front yard grass, and that has been very helpful. Of course, Philip comes and he does the back. I guess to say I don't know all of my neighbors in the neighborhood because I'm always in motion going in an opposite direction. The ones who seem to be closer to me, we get along very well.
And has your neighborhood evolved? How would you describe it demographically?
Well, the majority of the people in the neighborhood are Black. There are a few who are not. And I have not had the opportunity to meet them, as I said before, because I'm going in different directions and at different times. But whenever I see them, I do say, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever.
And how long have you lived where you live now?
25 years, I think. Yeah.
All right. So I'd like to ask a bit about your work life as far as where you have worked. When you mentioned your early employment, but I'm wondering about other things. I think you said you worked for the DC government for a while.
Yes, for a while I did, and then I got married, and then I didn't go back to work until Eric and Philip were in school. And then when I was hired by Washington Hospital Center.
And so back a second, with DC government, what did you do for them before you got married?
Well, I was in an office where whenever any of the people wanted to buy things, I would write the request up and give it to whoever's in charge of that. And that was on the waterfront. And it was DC government, yes. And that's about basically what I did.
Were you a clerk sort of in a finance office, or was it something else?
Well, I guess you could say, well, I really don't remember what the the title was, but I had to type. I guess you could say I was a typist.
All right. And so then later on, when you mentioned your kids being in school and all, and you ended up at was it then called Washington Hospital Center? And at some point, the name Medstar came in?
Yes, later on it did, yeah.
Okay.
I went in, yeah. I started out as a person who what office was needed for someone to come in to type or whatever like that. That's what I did. And then I was asked by the director, would I like to go to Maryland with them, and which I did. And I stayed there for over 20 years. And I was I had a couple of different jobs. My last job was that I sat at the front desk and greeted people. And when they came in, I would find out why they were there. One of the interesting things I did, and is when I didn't get fired, was that one of the higher ups came in one day without her ID on. And I told her she couldn't go any further. She had to go back and get it. And she was not happy. And she never forgot that. But in the area where I was, you could not go anywhere unless you had something that says that you are supposed to be there. There was a lot of things there that if someone got in and they decided they didn't like it and tore everything down, the people at the Washington Hospital Center and the other hospitals would be hurt. I'll put it that way. So it was, I never thought of me being a very important person at the front desk until later years when I found out all the things that took place there.
So you really had a concern that no matter what, you'd had a job to do, and it was to say only certain people can get in, and you stuck with it.
Yeah.
I understand that at one point, perhaps before you were at this front desk, that you were a technical librarian.
Oh, yes.
Now, which was that with something called Medstar Information Services, or was that with something else?
No, it's still with the same, all of it in the same building. Yeah, that was for a while, and then things started to change. And I was the person being that in that position with all the things that the people have to come to the library to have this and to have that. That was very good. The camaraderie there was wonderful. No matter what color you were, everybody got along. Of course, there might be some people who, didn't necessarily want to be bothered, but it didn't matter to me anyhow. I spoke to them, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. The other thing, and I don't know whether you were told this, but everyone loved to eat. And every day or every Tuesday, I would come in with food and sit it in the break room. And no matter what it was, and whoever it was, they would eat all the food. We had birthday parties. We've had people who were having babies. We had food for that. And so it was a very comforting place to go to, even though they had very important things to do for the company.
So some offices have potlucks and different people bring things in, but I understand what was called Fat Tuesdays. That's what it was called?
Yes.
This was not just one time a year, but every week.
Every week, yes.
And you brought the stuff. Did you make it? Did you just pick it up? Did you do a little of both?
I did a both of both of each, and Giant wasn't too far away from where we worked. And I'd go in there, yes, that Tuesday, yes.
And this is something you did of your own accord. You didn't like take a collection. I understand that people try to like put out a cup or something to put money in to pay you back, and you refused.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Why is that?
I don't know. It's just that I like to share. I like the people. I like to eat. And and I didn't think that I needed to be paid for that.
It does seem, given what you've already said about Crocheting for Christ and Brighter Day, and about your work life with what became known as a Medstar organization, that food and fellowship are, the combination of those two things are really important to you.
Yes, I think so. Yes.
And why again is that?
I look back at each person, and there are people who come in who have had death in the family. They've had other things that weren't the best when they left the house. And I felt that I just felt good about the day, and I wanted to share. And as a matter of fact, one day a young man came in. He was applying for a job, and it was hot. And so I gave him some ice cream. Another time, a man came in the door, and he had had a bad day. And I said, how are you? He says, I've had a bad day. So I gave something to him so he could sit down and be calm before he went to the back room to talk to whoever it was. And I think I want to treat people the way I like to be treated. I think maybe that's one of the things. And so that's what I did. I think I did that pretty good, I think.
And back to the technical librarian, I believe that this had to do with maintaining books that kept track of computer languages, that you were helping programmers in the hospital get the information they needed. Is that about a correct description, or can you tell me a little more about what you did as a technical librarian?
That's a good question, because I hate to say this, I have no clue what I did. I just did it. If anyone called me about something and I had to go to the library, I would go ahead and do it. A lot of the people there had degrees and stuff. I did not. But whatever it was that needed to be done in that area, I would do my best to do it.
All right. And I also understand, speaking of food, that I believe this would have been when you were at the front desk of the hospital, that you would alert your coworkers when the ice cream truck was coming.
Oh, yes.
And how did you alert them that the ice cream truck was coming?
I would either call them, or if someone was passing by, to pass the word. Yeah.
I thought someone told me that you said code vanilla. Does that sound right?
That sounds like it, yes. I forgot about that.
All right. So what years were you there in these two jobs related to Medstar?
Well, I think probably a total of 20 years, maybe a little more. I never counted the years, nor the dates or whatever like that. I know that I was there to do. Even when it snowed, I would get in God's car and leave from DC and come on up to there, and rain, hail, sleet, or snow, I'd go there because it was a responsibility.
Was this in particular when you were at the front desk because you knew somebody needed to be there for that job, that you would go?
Not necessarily, even when I wasn't at the front desk, yeah.
So you really wanted to be dependable?
I guess so. I never thought of it that way, but I guess so.
And were there any Asburyans in your work life? Did you ever cross paths with other members of Asbury in your jobs, or did you not necessarily work with any of them?
I probably, if I had to go down to the Washington Hospital Center, I might see an Asbury, but not often.
And I'm wondering about anything else that maybe is a fond memory of your work life?
Just working and have money in my pocket and be able to do the things that I would want to do. I think working keeps one's sanity in place, and not having work is just the opposite. And I can say this because I'm old enough that when I wasn't working, I wasn't happy. Even when I was married, I still was not happy. I became involved in the PTA, and that became another part of my life. And being involved with parents and the other people all over the world who come every year to a meeting, no matter where it was, Florida, California, wherever. I had the opportunity to go and to learn, to meet. And I did have the opportunity to meet the first Black president of the National PTA. And
What was that like?
that was a wonderful experience. And so, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, please.
And so seeing her in that position after 100-some years of having white people, and when I say this, I'm not against the people who were there because they did an excellent job. But to see that a Black woman was put in that position. As a matter of fact, the former PTA leaders came up to me and said, "We want you to vote for her." And I said, okay. And I think they went around to everyone, no matter what color you were, to get her into the office. And so that did take place. And so since that time, I understand they've had another Black person, I believe a male, to be a national PTA president.
And so I'm wondering about whether your involvement with the PTA, both on the district level and beyond, were those all volunteer positions or were there staff positions as well?
Volunteer. And the only thing that being a president, whether you're on the local level or whatever, your PTA paid for your transportation, whatever like that. But other than that, if you're just going as a regular PTA, you'd have to pay for all that yourself.
And so you got involved in the PTA when your sons were at the elementary school level?
Yes, they did. Yes. I was secretary for the Langton PTA. And eventually I became president of the Langton PTA. And then I went on to junior high. And I had, at the last meeting of the PTA at Langton, I said, I will not be president for the rest of my life. We need more people and more parents to be involved. And so we did get some people to become parents involved in that elementary PTA. And then I went on to junior high and then to the 10th grade, I'm sorry, to, can't think of the high school in Northeast right now, but those were the levels that I went on. And so it was interesting, and your life was not the same because you had a job, and then you had to take care of PTA things, and so, but it was interesting.
So eventually, even though your sons had moved up from elementary and junior high, you stayed in the PTA for a long time, even as you worked at Washington Hospital Center?
Yes.
And so why did you stick with it even after they were older?
It was very interesting meeting new people, people who live in your area, people who live in other parts of the United States of America, people who live in foreign countries, seeing what PTA was doing for families, children, schools, and a lot of things that I would not have known about if I had not been involved in PTA.
Can you give me an example of something that struck you that you learned, that the benefits of PTA? I mean, I think a lot of people just hear those 3 letters and they don't really think beyond that, but you were immersed in it. So what was it that struck you about how it was helping people?
Working closely with the principal and members of the school, finding out exactly what they needed and how we could go about making things a little easier for them. Working with parents, some people might be interested in a job, and we might have the opportunity to be able to tell them where to go. Anything to do with health, anything to do with education, all of those things were involved in PTA. And just traveling, leaving Washington, DC, getting on a plane and going elsewhere was very interesting. You meet people on the airplane and you talk with them and you find out you're going to the same place. And you find out that you can have a wonderful time and still go to meetings that you have signed yourself up for. And the thing about black, white, blue, or whatever was not in the picture when I was there. Everyone, no matter what color you were, we got along fine. The people who, after we leave from the National PTA, would keep in contact with those that we met from different parts of the United States.
So when you were involved with the National PTA, is it because you were a PTA leader at a local school? Was it because you were a leader of the PTA of the District of Columbia?
All of that.
You were president of the DC PTA.
PTA, right.
Do you know about when that was?
Oh, I don't remember the year, but I know that I had that position as president of the Dcpta. That in itself was interesting because my vice president did not want me to be president. And I remember when the National PTA president came to Washington, I asked him to go in my place, and he did not. There are other things that took place. And so it was a good experience. It taught me how to deal with people better than what I would have if I were not in that position. And to talk with parents who have children in the DC public schools, who have positions on different types of whatever it was in the school, to find out what they felt like. And I was even sort of surprised that I made some statements that some of the parents even were able to repeat it afterwards. And I said, gee, I said that? Wow. And, and so it was an interesting experience. And once I got out of PTA, it's like, phew, I can relax. I don't have to worry about doing this. I don't have to do that. And some of PTA presidents who were doing the same thing at the same time I was, they were happy to, but they knew that, all of us knew that we learned a lot and we tried to share with others.
How long were you DC PTA president?
The DC PTA president is only for 2 years. And then to go on the national level, depends on what your position is, it's 2 years. I think the president itself is 4, I think. But the other officers, depending on what they do, I think it's 2 years.
So were you an officer in the National PTA?
I was on a committee, but not an officer.
What committee was that?
That's a good question. I don't remember the name of it, but it was something that I was asked to be on.
And I understand that at one point, when you were DC PTA president, that Marion Barry, the mayor at the time, spoke at a DC event you had?
Yes, we called on him quite a bit. And and yes, he was always there when you wanted him to be, to say what he felt that needed to be done. At that time, he was very popular. And one of the things that we noticed that whenever we had something, food or anything, he always had a stick to pick out the things out of his teeth, and we'd all look at him and laugh. He was just a down-home type person, so, but he did very good. and for the DC PTA, yes.
And are there any other well-known figures you remember working with as you worked either at the DC level of PTA or when you were dealing with the national level?
Well, that's good. I wish you had told me all this before. I would have written it down. I don't remember anyone in particular, but there were very good people from different walks of life that did very good things for the children and parents of DC.
And when you traveled to the national PTA meetings, that was when you traveled for PTA?
Yes.
Do you remember a couple other places you went, like, you know, getting to see other parts of the country?
Well, as far as for the being on the being a president of a PTA, yes, you had an opportunity to travel, and Florida was one, California, several other places in the United States of America. I have not traveled out. Some people did go to Hawaii with the PTA, but I did not go.
And so for you personally, were these unique experiences for you traveling, or have you traveled lots of other ways? And I'm just wondering how much the PTA kind of opened you to the world beyond DC versus other experiences in your life.
Well, I don't know. I haven't really given it much thought. I just do whatever I do and then keep on going. and someone will say to me, you know, you did that. I don't know. I don't remember, but fine, let's, you know, move on to something else. I don't know why I don't hold things like that. I guess because I just want to move on and tackle something else. And if someone brings it to my attention, I might say, oh yeah, okay. I remember that a little bit, and then I just go into something else.
It sounds like you live in the moment.
I try.
Have you ever lived outside Washington?
No, I have not.
Only been in the city. Okay.
Yes.
And when did you retire?
I retired 19 something or other, 2009, I think.
And that was from Medstar?
Yes.
So that's hospital center at that point?
Yes.
Okay. And what have you done since you retired?
Well, I could say that I've taken life easy, sort of kind of like. I go to my giant, and I go to the library, and I get in Garth's car and I drive around, and I crochet, and I look at a TV, and I listen to music, and whatever I want to do or not do. And I'm not making any cakes and pies or anything, because I normally would do that when we're having meetings, and we haven't had any meetings, so I haven't done any baking or anything like that.
Has that been hard? I wanted to ask you how your ministries and how your ministries have changed because of COVID-19. So you just answered that question in part, I think, but other ways?
We're not seeing each other as we would every month. I've called several members to see how they are. Other than doing the crocheting myself and whoever else is doing it. Other than that, that's about it.
But it sounds like there's been an effort, especially for this particular ministry of Crocheting for Christ and Brighter Day, that you've been able to continue that mission by crocheting from home.
Yes.
And when you mentioned calling people, were you speaking of that particular kind of dual ministry, or were you speaking about Asbury in general, as far as trying to keep in touch with people in the midst of the pandemic?
I've talked to those who are not members of Asbury, but who are part of Brighter Day Crocheting for Christ. And some who are members of Asbury also.
I'm sure people appreciate you reaching out at this time.
Well, hopefully so. We have a few laughs and whatever. And as I tell some people, I've been calling you for the longest time. And now finally, I've sat down to call you in living color. So
Oh, so some of these calls have been via video conference, not by phone?
Not by phone, mostly by phone, not by in other means, yeah.
Okay. So you have mentioned a couple of times that when you travel in God's car. Can
Yes,
you explain that, please?
yes. I'm aware of the fact that I own nothing. God owns everything. And so when I say it's God's car, it is, because He has allowed me to have it. I have no control over anything, and I know who is in control. And so that's the reason why I call it God's car. And I don't call, my house, this house is my house. No, it's not. Everything that I have has been given to me by God.
Thank you. So of what are you most proud?
I don't even know if I've used the word proud. I am happy, I guess I might say, not proud. The fact that my sons have grown to be men, that they have good minds. I'm happy that I have grandchildren who are getting older. My two granddaughters fixed my hair the other day. Those things, I don't take anything for granted.
And of all the things you've done in your life, what has been the greatest blessing?
Good question. I don't know. I've never thought about it. I've never thought about it. I've just gone along with waking up every morning and be able to move wherever I have to go to sleep, and then wake up the next morning. That's about all that I can say about that. I can't take anything for granted because nothing is forever, and I'm not in control.
Thank you. You mentioned your age earlier, but I'd like to also ask what your birth date is and your age again.
My birthday is November 15, 1943. And yes, I want you to know that Sylvan and Dorothy reminded me that I was not 76 because the three of us are the same age, same year, just a few days apart. So now that I know how old I am, I will tell you that I am 77.
Thank you. And your full name is Moretha Johnson?
Moretha Elsie Burries Johnson. Is there something I didn't ask you that you wish I had? I think one of the things I've said to myself for several days, I should have asked, what is it that she was expecting to ask me, so that I'd have it on a piece of paper so that I would be going, and so forth. So, and I said, well, maybe I should have sent all this stuff to her. Then that way she would say to me, well, you know, this is this. And I'd be saying, oh, yes. And I'd be able to talk intelligently. But I've done the best that I can.
And I thank you very much for that. If you feel you have finished telling your story today, I'm going to stop the recording, though I want to stay on the video conference with you for a few minutes. Is it all right for me to just go ahead and stop the recording?
It's fine with me.
Okay, so give me a moment because I need to stop several different things. So just hold on, please. Thank you so much, Moretha. I really appreciate your time.